great job.
Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, Debunking Mythology. And I would like to thank you first, all of you who are becoming our regular patrons and who are becoming regular members. And thank you all very much. It means a lot to us, and we use it in the seva of dharma. Now, today, Sat means truth, Logos means a study or science, Sattology means a science of truth, study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means the science of fake lie imagination, study of fake lie imagination. Academic scholars are scared to call their own Abrahamic history as fakeology or mythology because they're scared if they do that, the entire structure they've built will fall like cards or dominoes. It will be domino effect. Anyway, they'll continue to peddle the lies and keep reforming what they're doing. Sanatana Dharma is not like that. Sanatana Dharma has never changed, and you cannot change the Sanskrit shloka. You change one, you have to change all the others. If somebody changes one shloka in Bhagavad Gita, he has to change everything else. Meaning changes drastically. Mahabharata, also the same thing. But people do interpretations because of the lack of understanding of Sanskrit. And also they don't cross-reference other Vedic texts, which is extremely important because you can validate each and every point in Bhagavad Gita with the same message from other scriptures also. Like, for example, the dimension of the soul, dimension of Atma. Shata Bhagasya, like the 10,000 part of the tip of the hair. Now, today we are discussing a very, very important topic. Why there is a need to reference Abrahamic or Christian dates in also telling our message, Sanatana Dharma message. Why don't we use a Vedic calendar? So before we start off, I would like to explain. I have a great friend of mine. I call him Rishi, Muni, researcher, and all the favorite tags you can give him because he does original research. Like me, we read the text and we try to find a reference according to the traditions. We also engage in speculation because we have not seen it. Pratyaksh Praman is not there. But we are relying on the authority of someone far superior to us. Ved Vyas, Valmiki. And generally, I always put a disclaimer that we are encouraging you to read. That's the main point. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Nilesh Oak.
Namaste, Aditya.
Namaskar.
Happy to be here.
So the person who invented AD was Domitius, and I forgot the last name, Domitius somebody, in 528 CE. That's where he started the calendar, 528. And when we talk about these calendars, a very common question gets asked. That question is, why don't we use our Shaka dates, era dates, other dates? But the thing is, the dominant power sets the time. In Yudhishthira Maharaj's time, it was a Jain. So the day India becomes economically strong, they will also start setting the dates. That's the economic reason to that. Yeah. What is your point of view on this?
So, you said it because few years ago, few hundred years ago, if you go back a couple of centuries, then Europeans very brutally dominated many parts of the world. India was no exception, and it was dominated by British. It was colonized by British. And so that is as a part of it. That is when the prime meridian from Ujjain was moved to Greenwich, London. That's around just after the attempt at revolution, 1857, just after that. So that is when eventually actually they made a full control. They took a full control of India. They changed the position. I forgot what they used to call before. It was the East India Company that was dissolved. And now the person was called Viceroy. I think that's when that change took place. And they just started taking everything. They shut down Indian industry, whatnot. Now, the question, the point is, we are right now stuck with the usage of BC and CE, or BCE and CE. Now, these are a bit of a secular terminologies, but even if you call them secular, guess what? I mean, that just takes you away, because AD is like Anno Domini, like, the year of our Lord, and BC is a before Christ. Now, the Jewish folks in America, they said, well, that's very, very religious, that Anno Domini, the year of our Lord. Whose Lord? Not our Lord. It is a Lord for Christians. And so they, academia or in general, they developed this terminology, instead of AD, calling it CE, like a common era. Okay. And the BCE as a before common era, and BC stands for before Christ. So they tried to keep it as close as possible. Still, it is referred to that to approximately 2000-year time period, like as a reference point. But the reason, even the feeling among the Jews in America and who did it, was also what? I mean, they were also stuck in a way. I mean, because in everyday life, if you have to tell somebody something happened a certain time ago, what calendar are you going to use? You are going to use that calendar which is understood by people. And a simple example, Aditya ji, would be this. Right now, you, me, everyone who is listening to this or will listen to this, if we ask them, so what's your birth date? I mean, the full year, the day, month, and a year. Everyone in India, especially even those who complain, like saying, "Arey, why are we not using Indian calendar to tell when Mahabharata war happened, or when Ramayana happened, or many other events, Sushruta's timing? Why are we not using Indian calendar? Why do we have to say 6th millennium BCE or 13th millennium BCE? The reason is, I can just turn the light, turn, you said turning the light, or turn the mirror and say, okay, what's your birth date? Tell me the whole full birthday. The person is immediately going to say the date which falls into exactly same reference calendar, which is for a generic name, and we'll discuss the details, but generic name, I'm going to use a Western calendar. As from an Indian perspective, that's what a generic name would be. And then we will talk about the Gregorian and the Julian and what the basis is. So right now we are stuck because we have to use that calendar. Thanks to British, we can say, because they impose this calendar on everyone. And as you said it many times, like whoever controls the time, controls the world, controls and makes other people slave, right? That's exactly what it is. Now, my point, and we can discuss more, but my point is, our response to the usage of a Western calendar cannot be emotional and therefore foolish. Right now, I would like to assert that every time a emotional Indian or Indian just gets up and says on a social media, in an email, in just in a question answer session after my lectures that I go around the world and give the lectures, and they say, oh, but why do you use Western calendar? Why not use the Indian calendar to tell when did the Mahabharata war happen, when did the Ramayana happen, and so on? The point is, or even our today's time, why not discuss that in the Indian calendar? Why are we using still like 2021? Why not something else? But the answer is simple. No matter what answer you give, because the world is using 2021 as a reference point, you have to find a way to convert it. It is exactly the same, even if you go back. And then what I asked the question, I said, fine, okay, I will use Indian calendar if you give me a reference Indian calendar. For example, I will tell them, so 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war. Now, please kindly tell me, in an Indian calendar, how would you say that? And then these people simply disappear. And that's what I mean by the foolishness and the ignorance and also the emotion. So I understand their emotion. But if your emotion, that artha, is not backed by action, not backed by something, and I'll tell you, I mean, maybe today's part or maybe another part, I'll tell you what the actions are. So I started a Mahabharat Samvat calendar. It is there on the Twitter. Okay. And I want people to follow that because it's to start a movement. and then eventually we will create an application and it will go on. Right now, I mean, there are like 5,000 people, and I thank them who have, who follow that calendar every day. But what about others? So yes, you want the change to happen, but you will not do a damn thing about it. That's not how changes take place.
Also, the calendar system, like I said, it's set up by a dominant military power and political power. And today, and that is a second factor to take place. Like if Indian government has the guts, I would say challenge them also, that if they want to say India will follow this calendar, like there is a talk about renaming India as Bharat, which is actually in the constitution, Bharat Ganrajya. So if they want to do it, they can do it. It depends on the political powers also. That time Yudhishthir Maharaj had the guts to call it during Mahabharat, is that it's a dharmic government, and so they decided the time for everyone else. Yes. So if
what I will quickly add is, as far as the name India and Bharat goes, the both name exist. Like you see the stamp, you will see in a Nagari script written Bharat and then India, right? So first thing, they exist. Second thing is, not many people realize, but even the word India also is of an Indian in origin. Not many people necessarily know that,
right.
And it's very interesting that that Hindu coming from the moon,
yes.
And that name got everywhere. But in the case of a calendar, government, whether government will do it or not, I don't know. But even for a government to implement something, we need to have something. And right now, I will tell you, as is, it's not there. I have created it, but see, that needs to become a mainstream before people can start using it.
That's
see, right now, when if I say right now, oh, when did you go to school? When did you do your executive MBA? And if I say 2008, don't say anything else. Immediately, you know when I did it. You take 2021 minus 2008 and you said, okay, those many years ago, I did that. Okay, that is how far the Mahabharat Samvat needs to be popularized.
That's right.
Before we can get rid of the BC and AD business or CE and BC business.
Yeah, you said a good thing about the Hindu, because that's why the Greeks took it Hindu and they make it India. Because of their naming systems, they always put A behind something.
Yeah.
Now, one more point before you start the presentation. Few people say that why the Devanagari is not getting popular. The reason is we have started. See, if you look at the history of Philippines or any other country, the way they started using Roman letters for their own language also. And which I am seeing also gradually in social media, people write Hindi using Roman letters.
Correct.
Now, again, it's a question of habit. Now it is easier for you to say, and we are discussing this show in English, not in Hindi. The reason is for the Western audience.
Yeah.
If you want to make it relate, and so many of them are watching, it's a live show. And if I try to make it in Devanagari, so again, Devanagari, I agree with you. It's a better script. I personally write even English in Devanagari. You can see my notes also. And it's a better way to pronounce. So I never mispronounced anybody's name. Because in Devanagari, I can capture the sound. If somebody says Mikhail, I write Mikhail. Somebody says Michael, I can write Michael. Michael has different way of writing Devanagari than Mikhail.
Correct.
But in English, both words are the same. Spellings are the same, Michael.
Yeah.
But if the way, so if you want to, so stop. Also, we also need to propagate the use Devanagari as much as you can. And in Devanagari, you can write any language, including Chinese, because you will capture the phonetics over there.
Yeah.
So yes, you would like to add something, Nilesh here?
Well, I would say no. You said Chinese, and I'm going to say like Xie. I can write it perfectly in a Devanagari.
That's right.
Niman Hao, I can write perfectly in a Devanagari. Not an issue whatsoever. Yeah. Absolutely, the vocal cords and everything that was done. In fact, over time, right within the Indian languages, some of the letters have actually gone down. They had the ru and ru, I mean, lo and then r applied to it. That letter I had learned when I was growing up, and that letter is now gone. I mean, you will find in the old one, ru, and I used to wonder, like, where do you use it? So yes, I mean, yeah, but even with the existing consonants and vowels, anything can be created. Anything can be created. Maybe I don't know how you create the, what do you call, the Kalhari, like the click, the click in the what you call the Bushman language, that I don't know. Maybe Sanskrit has not figured it out. Other than doing, do you know, right? There is a click in that language. Like, so you say, what is your name? So if my name has like a Nilesh, like that, there is a language, Bushman language like that, which has got a click in between in the names. But yes, the Nagari is very, very flexible to do it. And, again, Vinoba had suggested me a long time ago, even for the integration of India. He said, of course, those people who right now or then did not use Nagari as the script. But see, using Nagari as a script is a good idea. Now, what should not be misunderstood, and that is for, I will tell, for all the listeners from the Hindi belt in India, because when they see Nagari, they think it's a Hindi, and that misconception should be clarified too. Hindi is just another language, period. Okay, I mean, yeah, Rajya Bhasha, whatever you want to call it.
Script is different than language. Script is not the language.
Right. For example, I mean, right now we can say that Sanskrit, Hindi, Marathi, they use Nagari script. But I mean, if you go back to the Bauer manuscript that was like from 400, 500 BCE time, it was in Sanskrit. The whole manuscript is in Sanskrit, but it was written in an old Gupta Brahmi script. So it was nothing anywhere close to the Nagari script. So we need to separate that also. But my point is, the Vinoba had suggested that if all the Indian languages, if forget even changing a language, but just, and I totally agree with it, just make it, I mean, encourage people and make it as a policy to use Nagari script for everything, not to get rid of the other script. Because you'll be surprised, and it, of course, so you won't be surprised. But if you read, say, Kannada or Telugu, or even go back to Tamil, I mean, down to Tamil or Malayali, which, I mean, Bengali. I mean, if it's written in a Nagari, I will understand 90%. I know that.
That's right.
Because I do, but because I have not learned the Bengali script, therefore I don't read it, right? So I think that is there are some of these different ways of integrating it. But yeah, no, that's all I have. But if you have something add, and then I'll get into.
Let's get started. Yes.
Okay. So and again, we can talk about this itself, because this is a emotional issue, as I said. So I gave a title like, why do we use Western calendar, especially when we talk about our ancient events of Indian civilization, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many others. Okay. Well, this is the reason. I mean, many people just ask the question in a very lazy fashion and just run away. They don't understand that just because you said something, for a minute, you may think you look smart, you appear smart. No, but if somebody asks you a question and you don't have an answer, then your dumbness is exposed. Again, I'm saying this as a very humbling thing for people, that just don't speak something, don't demand something, don't ask something just because you think that's a good idea. It's a good idea, but it takes a lot of work. And are you willing to be part of it? The reason why we use the Western calendar, and frankly, by the way, Adityaji, there is nothing wrong in using any reference calendar as long as it works well. Okay. And as long as it's not used as in an oppressive fashion. For example, right now, this is how it is used, like thou shall, like everything, even the freedom, the so-called freedom is basically used, that is the postmodernist way, to basically oppress people, to divide people, and therefore oppress them and therefore control them. So these postmodernists will talk of oppression, but their whole objective is to divide people almost into a subgroup of one, so that they can control them, they can enslave them. Okay. So as long as that aspect is not there, it truly doesn't matter. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a one humanity, right? And before, if we go more than 4,000 years ago, then, it was very much the very natural culture with a lot of variation. People will call it pagan, polymorphism, and so on. That was there. These are the reasons why we, in an Indian research context, we use the Western calendar. This is in praise of a Western calendar, I would say. Okay, this is very important. Now, did India have a solar calendar? I'll come to that in a minute. Okay. or maybe another time. But just let me answer the question, why do we use Western calendar in referring to the antiquity of events of ancient Indian history? Here is why. Because sun and the ecliptic, which is what the path of the sun as seen from the earth, is the reference point, is the reference point for any astronomy that is done, any calendars that are done, and any time computations that are done that are employed on the earth. It has to be sun, it is sun, and it is the path of the sun around the earth as seen from the earth. That's the basis, guys. The second point, one of the key importance of calendar is to keep track of seasons and thus ability to predict beginning and end of seasons. Okay, so we just know, yeah, the summer is now here in the northern hemisphere, of course we are talking, then the soon fall would be here, and then the what do you call, harbinger of a winter, then the winter itself, then harbinger of a spring comes, and so on. In an Indian context, they are divided as 6 different seasons. We'll talk about that. So the key importance of the calendar is to keep track of seasons and thus ability to predict beginning and end of season. Now, why is this important? This is important because, or why is this important to know? Because the seasons are governed by the position of the sun with respect to the solstices, equinoxes, and thus by tropical solar calendar. Okay, so just remember that word, tropical solar calendar. Next time we will talk about the sidereal solar calendar. We will understand the difference between tropical and sidereal solar calendar, and it gets a bit complicated, but it gets extremely fascinating. So that's why we need a tropical solar calendar. Now, why, answer to the question, why do we use the Western calendar? The Western calendar is the only familiar and functional calendar in use today in India and around the world. In fact, the Western calendar is the only familiar and only functional tropical solar calendar that is in use in India and around the world. And when we communicate with each other, we communicate using that calendar. So if I'm going to tell someone when Mahabharata war happened, and if I say, well, that is that Mahabharata Samvat will do that job, right? But since Mahabharata Samvat is not understood by people right now, not embraced by people enough, that is the solution, guys, by the way. That is the solution. If you ever think you want to get rid of this AD BC or CE BC calendar, embrace Mahabharata Samvat. This year, we will call right now, just like we say, oh, what year is today? Or right now, it says 2021. In the language of an Indian calendar, Mahabharata Samvat, we will say, oh, that's 7,582, 7582. Last year, it was 7581. This year, it's a 7582. And so now the Mahabharata becomes a reference point. We say MS, Mahabharata Samvat 7582, and we would able to talk of Ramayana timing as a before BMS, before Mahabharata Samvat, how many years ago? Then we don't have to use a BC and AD. We don't have to use a CE and BC. But for that, you must embrace the Mahabharata Samvat, okay? Which today, right now, running as Mahabharata Samvat MS 7582, 7582. Now, but until we get there, and that is also, by the way, the Mahabharata Samvat is also a tropical solar calendar. That is how I designed it while working with one of the oldest, if not the oldest, living tradition of calendar makers of Indian lunisolar calendar, Date family in India. Okay, now let me show you what we use right now. Now, I used a generic word, Adityaji. I called it Western calendar. But today what we use is not the same calendar that was used 800 years ago, even in the West, even in the Western Europe. So today, what we call Western calendar is actually a Gregorian calendar. Again, it's a purely tropical calendar. Okay, how does that work? Now, a number of you would actually know that the days of the solstices and equinoxes are not exactly 21, 21, 21. They are 20 to 23rd. The actual equinox will change from 20 to 23rd March, also 20 to 23rd, even 24th September, there. And the days of solstices can also go plus minus one. Just to keep the things simple, because we are going to get at some intricate things, I'm making it everything 21. This is a useful approximation, and useful approximation is done for a reason, because our intellect, you can say, our brain in Kali Yugas are not very sharp. Okay, that may be a proof, Adityaji, that we are in a Kali Yuga. Okay, they don't work very sharp. So what we have, sun at the center. If you notice, it's not exactly at the center, but that's not a big deal for today's discussion. So in fact, the path is elliptical, like as seen. So sun at the center, earth is going around. If you have listened to my previous talks, you remember that in astronomy, one must be very comfortable using this language interchangeably. Like sun is going around the earth is going around the sun, and so on. So in this picture, I'm showing like earth is going around the sun and so on. So now, therefore, I'm showing these are the four cardinal points. The 21st December is the winter solstice in Northern Hemisphere. We are only talking of Northern Hemisphere. You have to turn exactly opposite if you want to understand Southern Hemisphere. 21st June is the day of summer solstice. 21st September is the day of autumnal equinox, fall equinox, and day of 21st March is the day of spring equinox. The beauty of Gregorian calendar, again, I'm telling you, this is in the praise of Gregorian calendar. The beauty of Gregorian calendar is that from 1582, that is what, approximately like 400 years ago or so, to 21st century. So instead of stopping at 2021, I took it all the way to the end of this century, 21st century. The calendar would look just like this. Of course, you understand there will be a change of plus minus 2-3 days around those days of the solstices and equinoxes. But for our reference, we'll use 21st. Now, let's superimpose the Indian seasons on this. The time, the point of vernal equinox or spring equinox, and before that, if you go 30 days approximately, and after that you go 30 days or 30-degree travel of a sun as seen from the earth, that is the Vasanta Rutu or a spring season. If you go next 2 months, that is the summer season or Grishma Rutu in the Indian calendar system. Now we arrived at the day of summer solstice. From that day, if you count additional 60 days approximately, that is the Varsha season or the rainy season. Then next 2 months with the point of fall equinox right at the middle is the Sharada Rutu. And then the next 2 months leading to the day of winter solstice is the Hemanta Rutu and Shishira Rutu. Okay, so that's how we understand it. This is a tropical calendar. I'll not explain today what the tropical calendar means, but in a simple language, what it means is the entire objective of this calendar, the Gregorian calendar, and also the Julian calendar. And we'll see why the change from Julian to Gregorian took place. The entire objective of this calendar, basically it's a solar calendar. It is also a tropical solar calendar, which is to say the calendar is designed in such a way that the day of a vernal equinox, a spring equinox, matches with a specific day and a month in the calendar. For our discussion, we are going to call it 21st of March. Okay. In reality, it could be plus minus 2-3 days, and that will always happen for various reasons. So that's how this calendar is designed. The intricacies of a leap year, when the leap year is added, when the leap year is not added, all of this is designed in such a way that this particular setup remains more or less the same for thousands and thousands of years. And Gregorian calendar has done a very good job at that. Okay. So Aditya, any questions or any comments you want to make before I go to the next calendar?
No, King Gregory set up the Gregorian calendar. Again, it's a political appointment.
Pope. Yeah, but again, it was a political, by the way.
Political appointment.
Yeah.
So
because Pope controlled more than a king. Pope had more power than a king.
The entire Roman Empire was usurped by the Pope and papacy. And the papacy is nothing but the old Roman Empire. So people say, where is the old Roman Empire went? Is it still here? is known as Catholicism.
Correct, correct. And therefore, precisely for that reason, because the change was made by Pope Gregory, that was not accepted by many places, especially those who were not Catholics. They did not accept it right away. And even among the Catholics, they did not accept for a long time. Like, it was not a uniform acceptance. Then the Eastern, what do you call,
Church
Eastern Orthodoxy, the Russia and all, they did not use it for a certain time. And slowly everyone started accepting it. And because most of these European countries had colonized much part of the world, once they accepted it, it became a norm in those places also, including India. Now, let's understand why this change took place from a Julian calendar to Gregorian calendar. Because the calendar that we use today around the world, the way with the methodology it is used and the changes are made and the leap years are added, that only started in 1582. Okay, so like 500 years, about 500 years ago. That's it. Okay, so before that, what did we have? We had this Julian calendar. Now, you'll say, well, wow, what is it? It looks the same. Now, forget this 2006 date. I'm just using that as a picture. Well, it looks the same because Gregorian calendar came from the Julian calendar, but we'll also see the differences. I am just superimposing the 6 seasons of Indian system on top of this. These 6 seasons are not used in a Julian or Gregorian calendar, but they are needed to be used to understand eventually why in doing a historical research, why we use these calendars. The important thing is the season should be kept constant. Like, we should understand what season it is. And to do that, we need a independent tropical solar reference calendar. And a Julian calendar as well as a Gregorian calendar do a very good job of that. The India in ancient times, they may have a purely solar calendar. We have a reason to believe that they had a purely solar calendar. We have the names, which I have incorporated into the Mahabharata Samvat, that whole Mahabharata Samvat, Mahabharata. So the Adityaji, I have, instead of India, not that we have a problem with India, but the title for that is a Bharata Dinadarshika for the Mahabharata Samvat. So the word Bharat is used there. Dinadarshika, the word is used, and it's a Mahabharata Samvat. So now this calendar existed, or it's assumed that it existed at the time of Julius Caesar. Okay, and it's assumed that it was created, it was commissioned, whatever, on at 45 BCE. Okay, now we are using before Common Era there. So this calendar then and our Gregorian calendar kind of matches. But there is a problem. There was a problem with Julian calendar, even as a purely tropical calendar. It did not keep up. It was not successful in holding the specific day and a month constant with respect to the cardinal point of a solstice or an equinox. And we'll see why that happened. And that is the reason that finally led to this change from Julian to Gregorian calendar. Okay. Now, there was a very interesting, and the number of you who are listening, if you know this story, great. If not, I mean, you can read it in the Google. It's also, I have also covered this in my book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? The Mystery of Arundhati, where I have discussed a similar event, similar challenge in an Indian context that happened 17,000 years ago. Okay, 17,000 years ago. And the challenge that we are talking here is about 700 years ago. So don't confuse, okay? The Roger Bacon's challenge is about 700 years ago. The challenge in the Indian history related to the calendar that happened 17,000 years ago, known as the fall of Abhijit, okay? So, and we have discussed that, by the way, in one of the episodes. So what happened is that, 45 BC is when the Julian calendar was. Then it was assumed that Jesus was born somewhere around that 0 mark. Now, that is the funny part. because someone jokingly in America, it's a very popular joke. They said, "Oh, by the way, Jesus was born in 480," and those, not everyone gets the joke, but the joke is that the zero is supposed to refer to the day of birth year of a Jesus, but people say nobody really knows whether he existed, or if he existed, nobody really knows when exactly he was born. It's a very well known in Canada and America. I mean, I only heard this when I came to Canada. Okay, until then I did not know this. 480, like he could be born, assuming he did exist, born in 480 and so on. Anyways, that's not relevant. But what happened is, so now let's look at the Christian religious tradition. Based on that, at that time, which is when? Now, Aditya ji has mentioned like a 500 years when they finally formulated the calendar, which very well likely could be the true. But even the very idea of a Christianity as a philosophy and the creation of a Bible, I mean, that's something finally took place 300 years. I mean, around 300 AD or 300 CE, the Nicaea, the Nicene Council. That's when they created it. That's when they now formulated official policy. And at that time, what has happened, and I'm going to show you what that happens, is that there was some shift. So right now, just accept that there was a shift. I'll tell you what that shift is. That there is some reason, I mean, mathematical reason why there is a shift that happens with respect to Julian calendar, not as much with the Gregorian calendar, because they tried to fix that problem. And therefore, by the time 13th century, when Roger Bacon was there, he realized that all the very orthodox, very dogmatic, very devout Christians are celebrating many festivals, many events related to Christianity or Jesus Christ on the wrong days. And in that faith in Christianity, it was considered, I don't know for what reason, but sought to be very wrong to celebrate something on the wrong days. We can in general relate to that. Like if somebody has a birthday on the 28th of July, then that person may feel like celebrating only on that day. So Roger Bacon tried to bring this problem to people's attention, to the attention of a pope and whatnot. Actually, he finally wrote a letter. Unfortunately, it so happened that by the time the pope to whom he wrote the letter, not to confuse with Pope Gregory, by the time the letter was reached, more than likely the pope was gone. Okay, and nobody acted anything on it. Another problem is, even if they wanted to act, the 13th century Europe just simply did not have the mathematical power that was required to carry out these kind of corrections. So credit goes to Roger Bacon for meticulously trying to figure this out. And what he had figured out is that there was a gap from what they were actually celebrating versus actually what was assumed to be the case with respect to Jesus some 1200 years ago. And there was a gap of 9 days. So everything was celebrated supposedly on the wrong day. And that's like in the dogmatic thinking, very, very bad thing. And he was trying to educate the popery and all those, and nobody was listening because nobody was understanding how this calendar worked. Okay, it was the medieval, the dark ages we are talking here. Now, why does this happen? The Julian calendar, it shifts the day of this winter solstice, summer solstice, any day for that matter, but we are going to talk about these cardinal points, by 1 day every 128 years. And I'll explain why that happens. But every 128 years, there will be a shift, complete shift of 1 day. Now, it doesn't look big, doesn't sound big, but now you start adding, say, 1200 years, now you have a 12 or 1300 years, now you have a change of how much is that? Of a 10 days. Now that can be substantial. That's exactly what was happening in his time. Nobody listened to him. Actually, it has to come down to 1582 and Pope Gregory's time. Now, Pope Gregory is just a ceremonial figure. He didn't do anything. It is some people working for him finally figured out. And do you know why they figured it out? Because by that time, finally, okay, this is like time of a Copernicus, you can think. Finally, the Indian numeral system, Indian mathematical system, even the mathematical systems of South America, the Mayans, finally they have reached Europe. Finally, they know, even then it's very difficult, but they at least love way better than 13th century. They know how to perform the complex calculations using the Indian numerals, the Hindu numerals, okay, the decimal places, the place value system, the zeros, and therefore now they have the confidence to make the change. That confidence was not there few centuries before. So what is the challenges? There is challenges like in the calendar and a computation. And the correction became possible in 1582 because the Hindu mathematics reached Western Europe. They built some confidence in it. Because remember, even when initially the Hindu mathematics came, the Europeans were so scared of zero, okay, and they were so scared of the decimal place. I mean, actually, they were scared of a decimal place. You know how the decimal place works. So they were not feeling like trusting this system. It took some time. Eventually, it became possible because likes of Copernicus started using it, you know, in the astronomy and whatnot. So, what is the difference? Why does this shift happens in Julian calendar that does not happen in Gregorian calendar? Remember, Julian calendar came first. The shift was happening. Roger Bacon noticed it, tried to bring it to the attention of the religious authorities. Religious authorities themselves were incapable of understanding any of it, so they ignored it. Finally, with the colonialism and all that, the additional knowledge came from around the world, many places, but one of the important one is from Hindu mathematics. They finally became comfortable. They could do the computations, and here now they could explain it. Because see, Roger Bacon understood 13th century, but if he cannot explain it to the audience, like to the people who he needs to convince, then he may not be successful, even if one individual is sharp enough, intelligent enough to understand it. So what the Julian calendar does? It because see, the days it understands, the calendar length of the sun, like sun completing one circle around the earth or earth completing around the sun, whichever way you look at it, is from tropical to tropical, which is to say from the point of spring equinox to spring equinox, or a point of solar solstice, summer solstice to summer solstice, etc., is not exactly 365 days. Actually, it is a 365 days and some more time. But when we calculate, we cannot say half a day, quarter day, that doesn't make sense in a year starting at some 10 o'clock in the morning on certain day. So therefore, they were using 365 days. But the simple rule they had added, this is the time of Julius Caesar, is that every 4 years, they will take one leap year. Okay, so one extra day. And for most part, that seemed to be doing a fine job, which is length of a Julian year assumed is therefore 365.25 days. Every 4 years, you take extra day. So it's like 0.25, 0.25. Now, what is the problem with that? The problem is that the actual length of the year is not 365.25 days. So what is it? That number is close to the number that Gregorian calendar now matches. It's not exact, but it is close enough. So what is that number? That number, the actual number, and again, Earth is also changing. I mean, solar system also, if you go thousands of years, some constants will change. But for simplicity, the actual period of the solar year is very close to what is assumed in the Gregorian calendar, 365 days, 0.2422, not 25. Some of you would just laugh at this and says, my God, this whole thing for just that small difference of 0.0078. Well, guess what? In the small time period, like in one person's lifetime, it doesn't make much difference. In fact, it makes almost no difference. No big deal. But when you use that same system for hundreds and hundreds of years and thousands of years, then the problem starts happening. So everyone notice the Julian calendar, it assumes the average length of 365.25 days. And the actual time for the solar year is not 365.25, but that number is much closer to 365.2422. Now, how to get to that number? That is when around that time, finally using the Hindu mathematics, people in Europe figured out that what can be done. And instead of taking leap year every 4 years, they came up with these rules. I'll quickly go over them. They're not complicated. It's just you have to remember to do it. It's like if you go to UK or India or Australia, you just drive on the other side of the road. And if you come from those places to places like most of the Europe or America, then you have to drive on the different side of the road. This mechanism is same, but you have to remember the rules when you take a left turn and a right turn. So no, nothing complicated. You just need to know this and follow it. So in Gregorian calendar, instead of taking leap year every 4 years, what they did is this. So first they take, so unless the year is exactly divisible by 100, okay, so first is take a leap year every 4 years, which is very similar to Julian calendar. Okay, simple. But there are some exceptions. Unless, so you continue to take a leap year, but you don't do it, which is to say, unless the year is exactly divisible by 100. Okay, so if so remember, the Gregorian calendar began in 1582. So think of what's coming now: 1600, 1700, 1800, 1900, and 2000. Those are the hundreds divisible numbers that are gone by. Okay, so 1700, that year 1700, 1800, 1900 are not leap years. The next exception says, unless this centurial number is, which is divisible by 100, these years are leap years if they are divisible by 400. So it's divisible by 100. We should typically take a leap year. Okay. Sorry, not take a leap year. But if that number is also divisible by 400, then take a leap year. So what does that tell you? That means the year 1600 or year 2000, they were leap years. Like 2400 would be leap year, but 2100 would not be a leap year. Okay, that is the logic of it. And what does this all does? It helps adjust the length of the year matches with the actual or close to the actual tropical solar year. That's what it does. Just for a quick summary. So now this is the delta between the Gregorian and Julian calendar. I'm just taking those two numbers, the length of the years, average length of the years, you can say. The delta is 0.0078 days per year, not very big. So when they settled this, when the Julian Caesar started it, for his lifetime, it didn't make a difference, maybe even not the lifetime for another 100 years. But then slowly the errors started accumulating. Okay, and that's where this 128 number comes from. There will be a shift of 1 day every 128 years, because every year that 0.0078 will be extra compensated in a Julian calendar. That keeps on adding up. And therefore, if you don't make a correction like done in Julian calendar, then what will happen is in 128 years, there will be a shift of 1 day with respect to these cardinal points of solstices and equinoxes. So that's mathematics. Those people who love mathematics, hey, your curiosity has been satisfied there. But what's the big takeaway? Those people, for everyone, and those who are scared of numbers, well, there is a shift of 1 day with respect to the equinox or solstice in Julian calendar every 128 years. This will result in equinoxes, solstices, they corresponding with different dates and months over a period of very long time. Over a short period of time, say something that happens on 21st of June will now happen what? It will happen 20th of June, and then it will be after another 128 years, 19th of June, and then 18th of June, and so on and so forth. Okay, as the time goes forward. Now, let's quickly superimpose the Indian seasons. So now, again, let's look at this. We have seen this before. Okay, now just to give you an idea, and we can stop there and discuss this. And I don't know, Aditiji, if we can even take some questions from, if we can read it. If not, then you and me will do it. Just want to give you a flavor of what would have happened, let's say, if the Pope Gregory had not changed the Julian calendar to Gregorian calendar, made some modifications of the rules. Now, by the way, it was not Pope Gregory who figured this out. He was the Pope, so he got that name, okay? But the people working for him finally figured that out. So what if we would have continued to use Julian calendar to our days towards the end of this century? What would have happened? What would have happened different? Just to give you a feel for it. As I said, right in 13th century, when Roger Bacon noticed the changes, what changes he saw? he saw something like this. For example, say Jesus' birthday, it was celebrated 25th. I mean, now we also people do it, right? 25th of what, December, right? As a Christmas day. It has shifted in such a way that it has moved by about 9 days. Okay, so it was like, for example, so 25th minus that, so like 15. So it was like celebrated as if like on a 16th, 16th December. Now my point is, it should have been celebrated on a 16th December, but people were still celebrating on 25th December, and that Roger Bacon saw as a problem. The same problem for the Easter celebration and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's what I mean. Like, so there is a shift. Instead of people are celebrating 25th of December, but he's saying, hold on, if we truly mean to celebrate, to match the timing of what exactly is doing, we should do it on 16th of December. We are not doing that. That's what that was his worry. Okay, so if we would have let this Julian calendar flow to our times and until the end of this century, this is what would have happened. So I'm saying 45 BC is when it's assumed that the Julian calendar began. And let's say we would have let it flow to our times and additional 80 years towards the end of the 21st century. Okay, every single point, each of these cardinal points, solstices and equinoxes, they would have shifted. And this is how they would have shifted. Remember this direction. Okay, so let's call this in the picture anyways, like a clockwise direction. This is what they would have shifted. The reason you need to remember that is when we eventually, the next time when we talk about what is the effect of this for the ancient events, they will go in the other directions, because from 45 BC we came to our times here. So that's why they're going in a clockwise direction. If we go backwards, they will go in an anti-clockwise direction. So what happened? For example, if you would have let this Julian calendar flow to our times and for additional 80 years, by the time 80 years would be over from today, the fall equinox that we celebrate around 21st September for this discussion would have shifted to 4th of September. The 21st June that we just, we just had our longest day, right? 21st of June, the summer solstice in the Northern Hemisphere. That would have shifted by our times. I mean, right now we would be talking of 5th or 6th of June as our day of the summer solstice, if we would have used Julian calendar. Now, what would happen? If we still stick to 21st June, which was what is happening in the Roger Bacon's time, but actual longest day would have been on a 5th or 6th in our time, 5th or 6th June in our times. But if we would have stuck dogmatically thinking 21st June is the longest day, then we would have celebrated 21st June as the longest day, but it was actually not the longest day. The same thing happened with 25th of December, the Christmas day. Okay, and for the spring equinox, it would have shifted to about around 4 March, and for the winter solstice, it would have shifted to about 4 December. Now, these are estimates. What I mean is actual number that I'm giving you, just like there is an uncertainty around 21st September, in reality, it can be plus minus 2-3 days or even more slightly. Same thing is true for 4th September and 4th June and 4th March and 4th December. That's not a big deal. That's known. That happens in our time right now with the Gregorian calendar. But directionally, where it would have gone and how far it would have gone is shown here. Now, how did we calculate this? Simple formula. Okay, remember that 0.0078 is the delta that we have to account for error every year. It looks very small. It adds up over a period of time. So over a period of 2145 years, so 2100 plus 45 BCE, it would have amounted to how much? That total number divided by 128. Why 128? Is because that's the time period in which the solstice, point of solstice or equinoxes shifts by 1 day. So essentially, from the time of Julius Caesar to our times, we would have seen in the Julian calendar a shift of about 17 days. And that is to say the spring equinox, solstices, or any point, any reference point would have shifted by 17 days. Okay, so that's how we would have actually celebrated our seasons also. So we will stop there. And this is where Aditya ji will start next time. like why do these days and months for the equinoxes and solstices shift? We already saw why they shift, but we will see how much they shift when we go to 6 millennium BC for Mahabharata, or when we go to 13 millennium BC for Ramayana, and why we should understand that. And this does not take into account the lunisolar calendar yet. This is purely tropical solar calendar. So once we do this, then we will bring in the lunisolar calendar, and we will tell how there is an additional change happening with respect to the lunar months that are used in the Indian calendar. So I'll stop here. Let me stop sharing. And if we have a time, and if you can see the questions, we can take it, or otherwise you and me can discuss for a few minutes.
So one of the things which comes to my mind is people, when they do not have even Shraddha for Mahabharata, and they are learning from Wikipedia and Quora, all these things is Greek for them. We are speaking Greek or Latin or something. This kind of information is for someone who already it's at some basic level. Like, for example, I always give an example. When you're going to buy a potato from a supermarket store, you ask the person who is experienced in that. And when it comes to dharma also, you again go and ask a Walmart cashier or a sabji wala on the street. So how will it do justice to them?
Well, it creates a lot of fun, and you can see that when I call them, I mean, we have to give a name and a short form, but I call them like woke Indic researchers. Okay, they suddenly out of nowhere, okay, they think, this guy is getting, so in referring to me, I'm saying in this case, oh, he's becoming very popular. Well, if I just blaspheme him a little bit, even I will become popular. So there are these folks, doing it and honestly making a joke of themselves. Okay. And so you said like some words you cannot use, but so I don't know if I should use the word, but I'll use it and you can edit it. I'm saying they're truly making an ass of themselves. Okay. Really by being truly foolish. But it is their choice. And frankly, I am thankful to them. I'll tell you why I am thankful to them. Because otherwise people would say, Acha, Nileshji, you did this timing of Mahabharata. Good. We got it. Now, okay, let's move on to the next subject. And that is good. That's what I like. Same thing with the Mahabharata. Same thing with the, Ramayana. Now these people are saying, no. How is this possible? For example, that I just mentioned while ending this, we are just talking tropical calendar, solar calendar, but add to it the sidereal solar calendar. Okay. Now there is no sidereal solar calendar. There is no sidereal solar calendar existing here. Now that's beautiful. Now you start saying the sidereal solar calendar indeed existed in India. Okay. I bet they had a tropical solar calendar too. Actually, they did. Taittiriya Samhita, like Yajurveda talks about it. But we have lost it for a very long time. Totally, we lost it for a very long time. Now, this is a good and a bad. What is the good thing? The bad thing is we have lost it. The tropical Indian solar calendar, Madhu, Madhava, and those whole 12 months, Tapatapasi, we have lost it. The good news is so much time has gone by, that calendar existed in such a deep antiquity that there is almost no trace left of that calendar. Even in Ramayana that happened 14,000 years ago, even in Mahabharata that happened more than 7,000 years ago, and out today, we just don't know it. Somehow, by the grace of our Rishis and Munis and Vyasas and all, it survived for us in the Yajurveda. Okay, so you said yes, that we need a Shraddha, but I would say in this case, Shraddha is not enough. We also need the intellect if you want to understand this.
No, Shraddha comes with intellect. You cannot have Shraddha without intellect, and
yes,
it's a vibe. So one of the things which is also very funny is most of these researchers, they come up to you with some basic question. Did Krishna ever exist? Now, they've been asking this question for 20 years.
Yeah.
Now, between this time, they go to the temple, get peace. Now, if the name of Krishna and first of all, it's not a ISKCONish language. Somebody commented over there too.
I saw that. and
So,
once you finish, I will tell you, if what you and me were doing was truly ISKCON thing, then this is how it would have looked. We'll give them a demonstration,
yeah.
to that guy.
No,
Yeah.
but because the point is just an organization. Sanatan Dharma is way older than any organization. And so don't connect organization to Shastra, because organizations are built to promote the Shastra. Organizations don't define the Shastra, like the Hare Krishna Mahamantra is written in Kali Santaran Upanishad. Iti Shodashaka Namdam Kali Kalmasha Nashatam Nato Parto Vaya Sarva Vedeshu Drishyate. That is the opinion of the Veda.
Right.
So you have a right to not follow the opinion. You
Correct.
can follow your own opinion.
Correct.
So it's like, if you think the water in the glass is transparent, that's your opinion. It might have chemicals also, which are transparent.
Correct.
So if somebody else tells you is knowledgeable about the water is not drinkable.
Drinkable, correct. It looks clean. It's not drinkable.
It's not drinkable.
Listen to that person.
Listen to that advice. Don't drink water from a grass hose.
Yeah.
Because that's not coming from the right source. Even the make look cleaner. Okay. The pipe may be infected. There have been 100 reasons of that.
Yeah.
So my and I would like you to add on it. You get far more comments than me on that because of the 5561 that you have, So for me, my answer is if you get peace from any name, technically all names of Devi Devta are called Harinam, technically.
Right.
Because they represent Hari. So it doesn't matter where you're from. So do not bring the organization in this discourse. It just makes you yourself very foolish on that.
Correct. And I'll say the same thing about the dating, for example.
Yes.
Suppose, I have determined, now it's not me who has determined, it is the evidence of the Mahabharata text, Vyasa, he has determined, or Valmiki's evidence that Valmiki embedded in Valmiki Ramayana is determining. I was just a nimitta. But the point is, if somebody says, oh, Nilesh ji, you are saying 12,209 BC for Ramayana or 5561 BC for Mahabharata, I don't agree with it. Not a big issue. But why are you even bothering telling me? Right? Somebody who has some other date, and you convinced, that person is convinced, be happy with it. Okay, and just live your life. But the very fact that person wants to come and tell me is that person himself or herself is uncertain. So in a way, it's a good news because they want to truly know the truth, but they lack the Shraddha, they lack the intellect, and therefore they cannot comprehend what is the truth. Because, there are these 15 different claims out there. Okay, actually 100, 15 for Ramayana, 100 plus for Mahabharata. Either they can take it on a Shraddha or they can use a Shraddha and intellect, analyze everyone's claim and come to the right claim. But there is no point somebody coming and telling me, just like what you said, somebody commenting, they will say, but so and so says this. Nilesh ji, what is your opinion about it? I said, why? My opinion is very clear. They are wrong. They are dead wrong. It's not my opinion, it's my assertion, and I'm willing to prove it. Now then I say, okay, bring them and we can have a debate. Then these people run away. The people who come to discuss with me run away. The original researchers also run away. Or they will just something like, okay, you organize the debate. I say, why would I organize the debate? It is you who is having a problem. I don't have a problem. If somebody thinks Mahabharata didn't happen, you said that, Mahabharata, Krishna didn't exist. Be happy if that helps you. Everyone can just agree with the things based on their intellect.
But in the case of problem, don't go to Krishna at that time. Don't go.
Correct. Then the prayer will not work.
Prayer may work, but why you should go? Prayer may work all the time, but why should you go? The last point is, I'll say, for simplicity, for these neophytes, because some people may not have the intellectual capacity and maybe time is also a thing. I give all benefit of doubt to the person who's inquiring. There is one line which you say, everybody says it, Ram Naam Satya Hai. At the end of the day, you can be satisfied with that also. Because ultimately every truth boils down to one person. So if you cannot intelligently resolve all the problems in your mind, because without guided direction, you will not be able to answer the absolute truth question. Not possible.
Right. And I want to add to that, just to support what you just said. See, when Gandhiji did the salt satyagraha, the Dandi March. Not many people know this, but every time he started something new and revolutionary of that kind, he used to go to Vinoba and explain his scheme, what he's planning, and used to get input from Vinoba, like, what do you think? He used to ask him. And so Gandhiji's specific question to Vinoba before the Salt Satyagraha, the Dandi March, was this. He says, this is my vision, but do you think people will follow it? Do you think people will understand it and they will follow it? And to support what you just said, and what Vinoba said is this. He said, what Bhagwan Ram can do with intellect and comprehension and understanding the strategy, the Vanaras can just do it on a Shraddha.
That's right. True. So very well put. When Hanuman meets Sri Ram first time, Sri Ram was impressed by his intellect. He tells Lakshman, I've written in my last book, that he must be a expert in all the Veda. He has read all the Veda. He's following all the Veda simply by his speech. And so if you create those kind of doubts and ask, that automatically shows that you have not read Veda, not even one line.
Yeah.
And if you do not read the Veda or one part of Veda, Mahabharata is Pancham Veda, you can read just, I'm not asking you to read a lot, just Bhagavad Gita is enough. One Bhagavad Gita is enough. Read, at least try. Because whatever is written there is all in all the other Upanishad also. And Upanishad are instructive.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to get into Quora, Wikipedia, and confuse yourself with your own questions and confuse others with your own questions.
Please, I agree.
Please do Swadhyaya. Because Swadhyaya Abhyasanam Cheva. Yes. And it is good for even Pavanani Manishina. So even for great people, even for Nilesh ji, even for me.
Yes.
All these are valid instructions.
Very true.
So, Nilesh ji, as usual, a wonderful show. And as usual, great research. And everyone is invited. I don't stop anyone. You have never seen anyone be rejecting anyone. But we just go for Sattology, not mythology. If you have your own work, you are very welcome on the show. Namaskar. Thank you.
Namaskar.